You are 12 years old and haven't yet realized that your body isn't entirely your own. It's the year 1443 AD, and you stand in the great hall of Bledsoe Castle, watching men in rich velvet and fur discuss your future as if you were a prized mare at market. Your name is Margaret Beaufort, and even though noble blood runs through your veins, you're discovering that bloodline means little when you're born female, in a world dominated by men who view daughters as assets to be traded. The rushes beneath your feet carry the scent of mint and rosemary, freshly scattered this morning, to mask the winter dampness seeping through the thick stone walls. Candlelight flickers on the faces of lords and bishops, speaking in low, urgent tones about alliances and inheritances, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air. You pull your wool cloak tighter around your shoulders, but the chill you feel isn't from the weather. Your guardian, William de la Pole, Duke of Suffolk, gestures toward you with a ringed hand that catches the firelight. The girl brings substantial holdings, he says, with the authority of a man who has never doubted his right to decide others' fates. Her inheritance includes lands in Somerset, Devon, and Dorset. A marriage alliance now secures those holdings for our cause. You want to ask what cause he means, but 12-year-old girls don't interrupt when powerful men are speaking. Instead, you watch John de la Pole, Suffolk's son, who will be your husband by month's end. He's around 14, still awkward with youth, his hands too large for his wrists. He glances at you briefly, then looks away as if embarrassed by your presence. If you enjoy diving into these forgotten stories of survival and struggle, consider liking the video and subscribing for more content like this. Please comment below to share where you're listening from. It's incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. Margaret Beaufort was born in 1443 AD into a world where her very existence was both a blessing and a curse. As the daughter and sole heiress of John Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, her bloodline carried a claim to the English throne that would shape her entire life. The Beaufort line descended from John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, and his mistress Catherine Swynford, a love affair legitimized by marriage and royal decree, though the stain of bastardy would forever shadow their descendants. When Margaret was barely 6 months old, her father died, leaving her one of England's wealthiest heiresses. In the 15th century, this was not a gift, but a burden. Wealthy orphans became wards of the crown. Their marriages were arranged to meet the political needs of those in power. Margaret's guardianship was given to William de la Pole, Duke of Suffolk, who knew that controlling a child's marriage meant controlling her inheritance. The great hall where 12-year-old Margaret stands has witnessed countless such negotiations. The gray limestone walls, sourced from local hills, have absorbed decades of whispered conspiracies and loud demands. Tapestries depicting noble hunts hang between the windows, their threads faded, but still showing lords on horseback, chasing deer through painted forests. The irony isn't lost on Margaret. Even at 12, she too is prey being hunted. Suffolk's voice continues, outlining the marriage contract as if Margaret weren't standing just 3 feet away. What he doesn't say, but everyone in the room understands, is that this arrangement ensures Suffolk's family will control Margaret's vast wealth for years. The rushes crackle under shifting feet as the gathered men nod in agreement. Margaret can smell the sweet decay of herbs mixed with the earthier scents of wool and unwashed bodies. Even nobles in 1443 AD bathe infrequently, and the great hall holds the accumulated odors of a dozen men who have ridden hard through winter mud to attend this negotiation. Margaret's soon-to-be husband, John de la Pole, shifts uncomfortably near the great fireplace. The flames, cast dancing shadows across his face, revealing the uncertainty he tries to hide. At 14, he is as much a pawn in this game as Margaret, though his gender gives him the illusion of agency. He will inherit his father's titles and lands. She will simply transfer hers to him upon marriage, as the law demands. The wedding ceremony takes place on a February morning when frost covers the ground like scattered pearls. Margaret wears a gown of deep blue silk, the color of royalty, though the fabric feels foreign against her skin. The dress has been tailored to fit her slight frame, but the weight of the silk and elaborate headdress make her feel like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. The chapel at Bledsoe is small and cold, with stone walls that seem to absorb sound and light. Candles flicker in iron sconces, casting wavering shadows that make the painted saints on the walls appear to move. Margaret kneels on the stone floor, her knees already aching through the thin fabric of her dress, and speaks the Latin words that will bind her to a boy she barely knows. Ego Johannes te Margareta uxore maxipio, John recites, his voice cracking slightly on the unfamiliar syllables. I, John, take you, Margaret, as my wife. The words echo in the small space, binding her future to his with a finality that makes her stomach turn. Margaret responds with her own vows, her voice steadier than her hands. Ego Margareta, to in matrimonio maxipio. I, Margaret, take you, John, as my husband. The words feel bitter in her mouth, but she speaks them clearly, trained from birth to fulfill her duty, regardless of her feelings. That night, the marriage is consummated, though both are too young to grasp what's happening. Medieval law required consummation for a marriage to be valid, but also recognized that children couldn't give meaningful consent. This contradiction that a marriage could be both legal and harmful defined much of Margaret's early life. In the following months, Margaret begins to grasp her reality. She resides in the Delapole household, treated with respect due to her rank, but under strict control, as if she were valuable property. Every aspect of her life is monitored. She cannot travel without permission, cannot write to anyone outside the household, and cannot make decisions about her own lands or income. Her transformation from child to political asset is most evident during meals in the Great Hall. Margaret sits at the high table next to her young husband, adorned in elaborate headdresses and rich fabrics that signify her status, but she isn't allowed to speak unless directly addressed. She observes the adults discussing state matters, military campaigns, and political alliances, knowing her future depends on decisions made by others. The food reflects the hierarchy and control. Margaret is served choice meats and exotic spices, showcasing her family's wealth, but she can't choose what or when to eat. Servants bring her predetermined portions at set times, managing every aspect of her routine. Even her diet isn't her own. During these months, Margaret shows the intelligence and determination that will later make her one of England's most powerful women. She listens intently to every conversation, gathering information about political alliances, military strategies, and the complex web of noble relationships. She learns to read subtle signs of power, who commands genuine respect, who relies on fear, and who is merely a figurehead supported by others. In 1444, news arrives that will change Margaret's life forever. John de la Pole, her 14-year-old husband, dies suddenly of fever. Official records provide no details about his illness, only noting he died at his family's estate in Suffolk. Now a 13-year-old widow, Margaret finds herself in a position both liberating and terrifying. Under English law, her marriage to John de la Pole was never fully consummated legally. Both were too young for the marriage to be considered complete. This technicality ensures Margaret's inheritance remains hers, without transferring to her late husband's family. Once again, she is among the wealthiest heiresses in England and available for marriage. The news of John's death reaches Margaret, highlighting the harsh reality of her situation. She sits in the solar, a private chamber where noblewomen spend their days, working on an embroidered altar cloth under her attendant's supervision. The needle in her hand makes tiny, precise stitches with silk thread, showcasing both her noble status and her training in domestic arts. William Delapole enters the solar unceremoniously, his face grave but his eyes assessing. "Your husband is dead," he states, devoid of warmth or comfort. "Fever took him in the night." Margaret's needle pauses mid-stitch, but she doesn't look up. She knows that showing emotion in front of powerful men is risky, revealing weakness they might exploit. "I see," she says quietly, continuing her embroidery steadily. The thread is deep gold, the color of royal regalia, and each stitch reflects hours of training in skills deemed appropriate for noblewomen. Margaret has mastered these small, precise tasks and has also learned to control her thoughts and feelings carefully. Suffolk watches her reaction, assessing her like a merchant evaluating goods. Margaret's composure impresses him, showing the self-control that will make her valuable in future negotiations. A girl who receives news of her husband's death without tears or fainting is one who can be trusted to act appropriately in any political situation. "You will remain in this household until other arrangements can be made," Suffolk continues, making it clear that these arrangements will proceed without considering Margaret's preferences. "Your mourning period will be observed naturally, but not extended unnecessarily." Margaret nods, understanding the subtext. Her mourning will last as long as it takes Suffolk to arrange her next marriage. At 13, she has been married, widowed, and is about to be traded again to serve the political needs of men who see her as an asset rather than a human being. During her widowhood, Margaret experiences a brief period of relative freedom, though still under Suffolk's control. She spends her days studying with tutors who teach her Latin, French, and the basics of estate management. These lessons are not meant to prepare her for independence. Women of her class are never truly independent, but to make her a more valuable wife for her next husband. Margaret proves to be an exceptional student, showing a quick mind and a hunger for learning that surprises her tutors. She masters Latin with the proficiency of a scholar, allowing her to read religious texts and legal documents in their original form. Her French is refined and sophisticated, marking her as capable of engaging in the international diplomacy that influences noble marriages. Most importantly, she begins to grasp the complex financial arrangements governing her inheritance. The account books detailing Margaret's holdings reveal the true extent of her wealth. She owns thousands of acres of fertile farmland, generating rents that provide substantial annual income. Her estates include not just agricultural land, but also valuable resources like stone quarries, timber forests, and river rights for mills and fisheries. The total value of her inheritance makes her one of the richest individuals in England, regardless of gender. However, this wealth comes with a price that Margaret is beginning to understand. Every acre she owns and every pound her estates generate makes her more valuable as a political alliance. Her inheritance is inseparable from her person. To marry Margaret is to gain control of her lands. She cannot refuse marriage without losing everything she inherited from her father. The reality of Margaret's situation becomes clear during a conversation with her mother, Margaret Beauchamp, who visits Bledsoe Castle in the spring of 1445 AD. The two women sit in the castle's herb garden, where early flowers are beginning to bloom despite the lingering chill. The garden offers a rare chance for private conversation, away from the ears of servants and courtiers who report every word to Suffolk. Margaret Beauchamp is a woman who has survived her own arranged marriages and political maneuvering. She looks at her 14-year-old daughter with eyes that hold both love and resignation. "You must understand," she says, her voice low and urgent, "that your inheritance is both your strength and your chain. The lands your father left you provide wealth and influence, but they also ensure you are never free to choose your own path." Young Margaret listens carefully, her hands folded in her lap in a posture of attentive obedience, ingrained since childhood. But her mind is active, processing the implications of her mother's words. She is beginning to understand that her wealth makes her powerful in some ways, but completely vulnerable in others. "What would happen if I refused to marry?" Margaret asks, though she already suspects the answer. Her mother's expression confirms her fears. "Your wardship would be sold to another lord, who would have the right to force your marriage or confiscate your lands as punishment for disobedience," Margaret Beauchamp explains. "A woman's inheritance exists only as long as she remains obedient to the men who control her. Refuse to marry, and you become a rebel against the natural order. Rebels lose everything." The conversation unfolds beside a bed of herbs lavender, rosemary, and thyme, whose scents will always remind Margaret of this moment of realization. The flowers symbolize domesticity and feminine virtue, yet also highlight the limited confines within which noble women must live, beautiful, fragrant, and contained. As summer arrives, news of Margaret's next marriage reaches her. King Henry VI, swayed by his advisors and political allies, has assigned Margaret's wardship to Edmund Tudor, Earl of Richmond. This arrangement serves several political objectives. It bolsters the Tudor family's standing at court, grants Edmund access to Margaret's significant income, and forms an alliance between the Lancaster and Tudor factions, pivotal in the forthcoming Wars of the Roses. Edmund Tudor, about 24 years old, is a decade older than Margaret. As the son of Owen Tudor and Catherine of Valois, the widow of King Henry V, his connection to the royal family makes him a valuable political ally, but also a man used to getting his way. Promised Margaret's hand in marriage and control of her inheritance, he is determined to secure both. The negotiations for Margaret's second marriage occur at Westminster Palace in the autumn of 1445. Margaret, now 14, is old enough to grasp the political significance of her marriage, but still too young to legally refuse. She travels to Westminster with a small entourage, accompanied by guards and attendants there to ensure her compliance, not her comfort. In 1445, Westminster Palace is a vast complex, serving as both royal residence and government seat. The Great Hall, where Margaret's marriage contract is discussed, is one of Europe's largest enclosed spaces. Its walls rise into shadows, and rushes cover the floor, rustling under every step. Footsteps echo in the vast hall, making private conversation impossible. Margaret stands by a pillar adorned with intricate carvings, observing the men deciding her future. Edmund Tudor is tall and powerfully built, exuding the confidence of a man who never doubts his entitlement. He converses with the king's advisors with ease, discussing Margaret's inheritance as if she weren't there. "The girl's lands will provide substantial income for our household," Edmund declares, his voice resonating in the hall. "With proper management, the estate should yield enough to support our court position and fund our military duties." He briefly glances at Margaret, assessing her like a promising horse. She is young, healthy, and wealthy, everything a nobleman desires in a wife. King Henry VI, not yet 24, and already showing signs of the mental instability that would later lead to civil war, nods his approval of the marriage. The king's endorsement is crucial, transforming the marriage from a private arrangement into a royal command. Margaret cannot refuse without committing treason against the crown. The wedding ceremony takes place at Bledsoe Castle in early 1446 AD, when Margaret is 14 years old. The ritual is more elaborate than her first marriage, reflecting Edmund's higher status and the political significance of the alliance. Margaret wears cloth of gold, the most expensive fabric available, and a circlet of precious stones that marks her rank as a future countess. The ceremony itself blends religious solemnity with political theater. The Bishop of Winchester officiates, lending the full authority of the church to the proceedings. Noble witnesses fill the chapel, ensuring the marriage cannot be questioned or annulled. Margaret speaks her vows in a clear, steady voice, knowing that showing reluctance or emotion invites speculation about her suitability as a wife. Edmund Tudor's vows are confident and possessive. When he places the ring on Margaret's finger, his hand completely covers hers, a physical reminder of the power dynamic that will govern their marriage. The ring, a heavy gold piece set with a sapphire, is beautiful, but so large that it weighs down Margaret's small hand. She will wear it for the rest of her life, a constant reminder of this moment when her independence was formally surrendered. The consummation of Margaret's second marriage occurs that same night, with no question of the participants being too young. Margaret is 14, considered fully adult by medieval standards, and Edmund is an experienced man who knows exactly what he is claiming. The encounter is brief, dutiful, and focused entirely on establishing Edmund's legal and physical dominance over his new wife. Margaret's adjustment to married life with Edmund Tudor reveals the stark realities of 15th century marriage for even the wealthiest women. She is now the Countess of Richmond, a title that grants her social prominence, but no actual power. Every decision about her life, property, and future is made by Edmund, who exercises his legal authority with the confidence of a man who has never questioned his right to control others. The household they establish at Caldicot Castle in Wales reflects Edmund's political ambitions and military background. The castle is a fortress rather than a palace, designed for defense rather than comfort. Margaret's daily routine is structured around Edmund's needs and preferences, with her own desires considered only when they do not conflict with his priorities. Edmund's approach to managing Margaret's inheritance reveals both his political acumen and his fundamental disregard for her as an individual. He immediately starts reorganizing her estates, appointing his own men as stewards and bailiffs. The income from Margaret's lands is redirected to support Edmund's military campaigns and political activities, with no regard for her wishes or concerns. Margaret observes these changes, growing increasingly aware of her situation. She is wealthy in name, but powerless in practice. Her inheritance fuels Edmund's ambitions, but she has no influence over how those resources are used. She realizes that being a noblewoman means being treated as valuable property rather than a person with agency. The political landscape in England during 1446 and 1447 AD is increasingly unstable, with tensions rising among different noble factions. Edmund Tudor's support for the Lancastrian cause puts both him and Margaret in potential danger as opposition to King Henry VII's weak rule intensifies. Margaret finds herself embroiled in political conflicts she neither chose nor can escape. In late 1456 AD, when Margaret is 13 years old and married to the significantly older Edmund, she discovers she is pregnant. The news brings both joy and fear. Joy because producing an heir is her primary duty as a wife, and fear because she understands the physical dangers of childbirth at her age. Medieval medical knowledge about pregnancy and birth is limited and often dangerous, making every pregnancy potentially life-threatening. Margaret's pregnancy continues through the winter of 1456 into 1457 AD, a period when political tensions in England are at a breaking point. Edmund is frequently away on military campaigns, leaving Margaret to face her difficult pregnancy with little support. She confronts the physical and emotional challenges of impending motherhood essentially alone, attended only by servants and midwives. The political situation worsens when Edmund Tudor is captured by Yorkist forces in August 1456 AD. He is imprisoned at Carmarthen Castle, where he dies of fever in November 1456 AD. Margaret, now about 7 months pregnant, learns of her husband's death while dealing with the physical and emotional strain of her advanced pregnancy. Edmund's death leaves Margaret in a precarious position. She is a pregnant widow with vast wealth, but no male protector, making her both valuable and vulnerable. The child she carries could be a son who will inherit Edmund's titles and her lands, or a daughter who will face the same fate Margaret has endured. Either way, the baby will be born into a world where political violence and arranged marriages are routine. Margaret goes into labor at Pembroke Castle in Wales on January 28, 1457 AD, at the age of 13. The birth is difficult and dangerous, as is typical for someone her age. In medieval times, childbirth is overseen by midwives whose expertise comes from experience rather than formal medical training, leading to alarmingly high mortality rates for both mothers and infants. Labor can last for hours, with Margaret enduring pain no 13-year-old should face. The midwives try their best with limited methods, relying on herbal remedies and prayers. Margaret's small frame makes the birth especially challenging, with moments when both she and the baby are at severe risk. Despite the difficult birth, the child is a healthy son. Margaret names him Henry, after the king, signaling her ongoing loyalty to the Lancastrian cause. This boy will grow up to be Henry VII, the first Tudor king of England. But in January 1457 AD, he is just a newborn, whose survival hinges on his young mother's ability to navigate the perilous medieval political landscape. Margaret's recovery from childbirth is slow and arduous. Medieval medical care for new mothers is minimal, and the physical trauma of childbirth at such a young age leaves her weak and vulnerable. She never has another child, though whether this is due to complications from Henry's birth or other reasons is unclear. It is certain, however, that the experience of pregnancy and childbirth at 13 has profound, lasting impacts on her health and outlook on life. The early months of Henry's life are fraught with uncertainty and danger. Margaret, a widow with an infant son, is surrounded by political enemies eager to eliminate them to claim her inheritance. She must find a way to protect herself and her child while navigating the intricate web of alliances and enmities in noble society. Margaret's solution is to seek another marriage, this time to a man who can provide protection for her and her son. She chooses Sir Henry Stafford, the younger son of the Duke of Buckingham. This marriage, her third, is different because Margaret plays a more active role in the negotiations. Henry Stafford, around 30 years old, is significantly older than Margaret, but not old enough to be her grandfather. He is an experienced soldier and courtier who understands the political realities of the time. More importantly, he is willing to protect Margaret's son and respect her role as Henry's mother, something not guaranteed in 15th century marriages. The marriage to Henry Stafford takes place in 1458 AD, when Margaret is 15. This ceremony is smaller and more private than her previous weddings, reflecting both the political situation and Margaret's changed circumstances. She is no longer a valuable virgin traded for political advantage, but a widow with a child seeking protection and stability. Margaret's relationship with Henry Stafford is the most stable and supportive of her marriages. Stafford treats her with respect and affection, allowing her to develop intellectually and engage in political activities. Under his protection, Margaret emerges as a political figure in her own right, rather than just a valuable asset. Her marriage to Henry Stafford from 1458 to 1471 marks a period of personal stability, even as England is engulfed in the Wars of the Roses. Margaret uses this stability to hone her political skills and build alliances that will eventually aid her son in claiming the throne. During this time, she becomes deeply involved in the Lancastrian cause, leveraging her wealth and influence to support the faction she believes will secure her son's future. She forges relationships with noble families, finances military campaigns, and learns how power operates in medieval England. Margaret's political education is thorough and practical. She learns to interpret shifting alliances, understand the economic drivers of political decisions, and recognize personal motivations behind public actions. Most importantly, she learns to use her wealth and social standing to influence events rather than merely react to them. The death of Henry Stafford in 1471 ends Margaret's most stable marriage and marks her emergence as one of England's most powerful women. At 28, she is experienced in politics and court life, determined to secure her son's future despite any obstacles. Margaret's fourth and final marriage is to Thomas Stanley, Earl of Derby, whose political flexibility and survival instincts match hers. Stanley is a powerful nobleman who has maintained his position through regime changes, making him an ideal partner for Margaret's ambitions. Their marriage, in 1472, is a partnership based on mutual respect and shared political goals. Under Stanley's protection, Margaret operates more openly as a political figure. She corresponds with noble families, financially supports favored causes, and positions herself as a potential kingmaker. Her son Henry remains in exile, but Margaret is laying the groundwork for his return to England. The 1470s and 1480s are a time of intense political activity for Margaret. She navigates the complex, dangerous world of Yorkist rule under Edward IV and Richard III, always advancing her son's interests while avoiding the fate of nobles who miscalculate their political moves. Her survival and success during this time highlight the political skills she honed since childhood, when she was merely a powerless pawn. Margaret's relationship with Richard III is notably complex and risky. When Richard takes the throne in 1483, Margaret faces a critical choice: accept the new rule or risk everything to support her son's claim. Her decision to back Henry's invasion of England in 1485 is the result of decades of political planning and personal sacrifice. The Battle of Bosworth Field in August 1485 marks the success of Margaret's long campaign to secure her son's future. Henry Tudor's victory over Richard III makes him King Henry VII, transforming Margaret from a political schemer to the mother of the ruling monarch. At 52, she achieves a level of power and influence unimaginable when she was married off at 12. As the king's mother, she gains unprecedented authority for a woman of her time. Given the title, My Lady the King's Mother, she influences court appointments, policy decisions, and royal marriages. She turns her inherited wealth and painful experiences into real political power. Ironically, Margaret's success costs her personal happiness and fulfillment. She dedicates her adult life to her son's future, sacrificing her own desires to secure his position. Her victory is complete, yet hollow. She gains power, but loses personal happiness. Margaret's later years are filled with both triumph and tragedy. She witnesses her son establish the Tudor dynasty, but also experiences the pain of outliving many peers and watching the political world she helped shape evolve beyond her control. She dies in 1509, shortly after her son, having lived to see her grandson Henry VIII begin his reign. Margaret Beaufort's legacy extends far beyond her family. She is remembered as one of the most powerful women in English history, turning personal trauma into political authority. Her story illustrates the constraints on women in medieval society and how exceptional individuals could transcend them through intelligence, determination, and strategic thinking. Margaret's influence on English history is profound and lasting. Through her son Henry VII, she is the ancestor of all subsequent Tudor monarchs, including Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. Her political skills and strategic thinking helped establish one of the most successful dynasties in English history. Her story shows that even in societies that severely limited women's opportunities, determination and intelligence could overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. Margaret Beaufort's journey from a powerless child bride to a key figure in English history showcases incredible resilience and political acumen. She adeptly turned the oppressive system into a means to achieve her ambitions, leveraging her wealth and noble status into real political clout. Her story is both inspiring and tragic, highlighting the potential and costs of ambition in a world that offered women limited opportunities for self-determination. In her later years, Margaret's deep religious devotion adds another layer to her character. She became actively involved in founding schools and supporting religious institutions. This spiritual focus might reflect both genuine faith and atonement for her political compromises. Her religious endeavors also served political purposes, boosting her reputation and providing another means of influence. Margaret's complex character is perhaps best shown in her relationship with her son, Henry VIII. She loves him deeply and has sacrificed everything for his success, yet also views him as the culmination of her political goals. Their bond is both affectionate and strategic, illustrating how personal and political motivations often intertwined for medieval nobles. Her story also sheds light on the broader social and political landscape of 15th century England. Margaret's experiences mirror the instability and violence of the Wars of the Roses, the role of marriage in political alliances, and how women could wield influence despite legal and social barriers. Her life offers a glimpse into a world where political survival demanded constant vigilance and strategic thinking. Extensive documentation of Margaret's life gives historians rich insights into her experiences and motivations. Her letters, financial records, and contemporaries' accounts paint a vivid picture of a woman shaped by her circumstances, yet determined to shape them in return. The historical record reveals her political savvy and personal struggles. Margaret's influence on education and religious institutions in her later years showcases another aspect of her character. She used her wealth and influence to support learning and religious devotion, aiming to leave a positive legacy beyond her political achievements. Her educational foundations reflect both her intellectual interests and her understanding of education's role in maintaining social and political influence. The connection between Margaret's personal experiences and political activities illustrates how individual trauma can transform into social influence. Her early childhood marriages and subsequent widowhood taught her about the realities of power and the importance of strategic thinking. These painful experiences laid the groundwork for her later political success. Margaret's story raises questions about power and agency in medieval society. While she achieves remarkable influence and success, she does so within a system that fundamentally limits women's opportunities. Her triumph is both a victory over oppression and an accommodation to it, illustrating the complex negotiations required for survival and success in hierarchical societies. The psychological aspects of Margaret's character are particularly intriguing. She shows remarkable resilience and determination, yet is willing to sacrifice personal happiness for political goals. Her emotional life remains largely hidden in historical records, but her actions suggest deep love for her son and a fierce determination to secure his future. Margaret's relationships with other women of her time offer another perspective on her character. She operates in a male-dominated world, but also builds connections with other noblewomen who share her experiences and challenges. These relationships provide both personal support and political opportunities, demonstrating how women could create networks of mutual assistance despite social restrictions. The economic aspects of Margaret's story are also significant. Her inherited wealth forms the foundation of her political influence, but she also proves to be a skilled manager of financial resources. Her strategic use of wealth showcases her intelligence and understanding of the link between economic power and political influence. Margaret's story continues to resonate in contemporary discussions about women's roles in politics and society. Her experiences highlight the obstacles women face in male-dominated systems and how exceptional individuals can overcome them through intelligence, determination, and strategic thinking. Her legacy inspires women facing similar challenges in different historical contexts. Margaret's later religious activities reveal another aspect of her character. She becomes more involved in religious institutions and charitable activities, perhaps seeking both spiritual fulfillment and a positive legacy. Her religious devotion may also represent penance for the political compromises she made throughout her life. Margaret's influence on the development of the English monarchy extends beyond her immediate family. Her political skills and strategic thinking helped establish precedents for royal authority and court organization that influenced English government for generations. Her story shows how individual actions can have significant historical impacts. The tragedy of Margaret's life is in the personal sacrifices she made for her political success. She gained extraordinary power and influence, but at the cost of her own happiness and fulfillment. Her life highlights the difficult choices women faced in societies with limited opportunities for self-determination and personal satisfaction. In her final years, Margaret experienced both triumph and isolation. She achieved her goal of securing her son's throne, yet outlived most of her peers, finding herself increasingly detached from the political world she helped shape. Her death in 1509 AD marked the end of an era and the start of a new chapter in English history. Margaret Beaufort's legacy reminds us of the complex relationship between individual agency and social constraints. Her story shows that even in societies with limited opportunities for women, exceptional individuals can find ways to wield influence and achieve their goals. Her life offers both inspiration and a warning, illustrating the possibilities and the costs of ambition in restrictive social systems. Today, you stand in the shadows of Westminster Abbey, where Margaret Beaufort is buried beneath a monument that honors her extraordinary life. Her bronze effigy depicts her in noble robes, hands folded in prayer, face serene in death, but it cannot capture the fire within her, the determination that transformed a powerless child into one of England's most influential women. The girl married at 12 and pregnant at 13 became the mother of kings, the founder of a dynasty, and the architect of her own remarkable destiny. She learned to navigate the power game with masters who thought they controlled her, but she played it so well that she ultimately controlled them. In a world where women were expected to be silent and submissive, Margaret Beaufort found her voice and used it to change history. Her story echoes through the centuries, showing that even the most powerless can seize control of their fate. Broken as a child, she rebuilt herself into a woman of steel, turning pain into purpose and trauma into triumph. The 12-year-old girl who once stood silent as men decided her future became the woman who decided England's future.